Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for today's webinar. The topic today is Boosting Productivity and Efficiency with Intelligent Documents. The webinar is hosted by the ABA Legal Technology Resource Center, and speaking today will be Bob Christensen and Scott Campbell from the Form Tool. The Legal Technology Resource Center is an ABA member benefit provided by the Law Practice Management section of the ABA. The LTRC has been providing lawyers with legal technology guidance for more than 25 years. You can find a variety of legal technology articles, guides, videos, and other resources on our website at www.lawtechnology.org or at our blog www.lawtechnologytoday.org. Bob Christensen will be starting us off today. Bob is the founder and CEO of the Form Tool. He writes and speaks on the uses of automated decisioning systems in professional and business environments and on the economic effects of rapidly developing information technology on both the enterprise and its industry. Thank you again for joining us. Bob, take it away.
Thanks, Josh, and welcome to our audience as we pursue the holy grail of intelligent documents. Documents that can help improve service levels and productivity while dramatically reducing errors. There's no reliable data for law yet, but the National Institutes for Health estimates the error rate in medical documents is about 24%. That conforms with our own observations in law that 1 in 4 final documents has at least one material error. Clients' expectations for perfection grow each year, and the courts are starting to take note. But the situation is even simpler than that to identify with. When you deal with your own professionals, your doctor, your lawyer, your accountant, what error rate do you think is acceptable? It's been 5,000 years since documents took on a paper persona to become the real bedrock of civilization. In all that time, though, documents have been every bit as dumb as the cuneiform bricks they replaced. Most of today's solutions to improve document productivity seem clunky, heavy, complex, and incredibly expensive to purchase and operate. They need to be simple, user-friendly, intuitive tools that anyone can master. We've identified 4 levels of intelligence to which your documents can aspire. At the end of Scott's presentation, we'll point you to ways of taking your documents to a more productive level. Scott Campbell has 2 titles with the firm. He is Director of Digital Experience. As such, he has oversight of everything that interacts with our users and customers. And he is the creator of the Form Tool, where he brings his academic training in computer science to meet with his more than 2 decades and 1 million pages of hands-on word processing. Scott is an ultimate word warrior and is well along the way to dramatically improving the intelligent delivery of information from professionals to consumers. You'll find his suggestions today well worth your undivided attention. Here's Scott.
Thank you, Bob. I'm going to talk about 3 things today. First, I'm going to go over your workflow and a simple change you can make that will allow you to create forms without spending a lot of additional time building up your form bank. Second, I'm going to spend most of our time today going through some tools that are built right into Word that you can use to create your form bank and make good use of it. And then at the end, I'll show off some features of the Form Tool, which helps you make smarter, faster, and easier forms. Excuse me. So to start off, let's talk about your workflow. I'm going to tell you how fantastic forms are and how you need to build your practice around them. But you don't have several days that you can devote to just building an elaborate forms library. So I'm going to show you a way you can work on your forms library at the same time you're going about your other work. Let's look at the way you're creating documents now, most likely. Let's say you have to create a purchase and sale agreement. You're likely to go into your old files and find an old purchase and sale agreement that's similar to the current deal. Hopefully the particulars will be somewhat similar and it'll be a fairly recent document so that the language won't be outdated. So that's your first step. That takes a little bit of time. Then you'll go through that document and you'll eliminate information that's specific to the previous deal, being careful not to carry any of that over. And you'll do some simple search and replace type of changes with the new party names and the new closing date and things like that. That's 2 more steps that take a little time each. And then you'll spend most of your time doing substantive revisions to the document. You might go into your files and find other documents that have language you're going to use. You'll find a paragraph that you might want to cut and paste from there and paste into your new form. When you do that, you'll have to be sure to eliminate new client-specific data that you've introduced. And you'll roughly finish your document. Then your final step is to check for errors. And this step most commonly occurs right at the end when you're up against a deadline. And you might miss things. Here we've got now 2 buyers in this deal, but I still have buyer agrees instead of buyers agree. On the signature page, I have a pronoun here that's referring to the previous deal that I didn't catch. I neglected to change a date here on the signature page, and who knows what other changes are scattered throughout the document that I've missed. Inevitably, you're going to miss something, and the client's going to walk in and flip magically to a random page in the document and point to a really boneheaded error and say, "Did you even read this before you gave it to me?" It's embarrassing. You want to avoid it. And so you spend a lot of time here in this last step checking for errors before you give it to the client. Now, I want to make just one small adjustment to your technique. You'll still start by finding an old document, and you'll still do the step where you go through and eliminate the previous client's information. But now I want you to spend even more time doing that. I've stuck even more clocks on here. I want you to do a super thorough job of eliminating every last point where there might be any potential change. Flag everything here that's going to have to be looked at. Take your time on this, and then when you're done, you have a completely sanitized document here that you can save into your form bank. Organize your form bank into various categories. Take this completely sanitized document, there's now no client information in here at all, and store it in your form bank under the appropriate category. Then proceed with your usual procedure of filling in the correct information. Go ahead and copy and paste information from other documents in here and change the client-specific information as needed. And then when you get to the last step, just before the deadline, when the time is critical, you won't have to spend nearly so much time going through this document because you know, because you spent so much time earlier, you don't have to check all of the little language throughout, all of the little things that were hanging you up before, the unnoticed errors that were getting past you. You've already dealt with those, so your final step is going to go much quicker. And it will be much less stressful too because that deadline is hanging over your head. And then as a final step, and this is optional, after the deadline has passed, when you're not in such a time crunch, if you have time, go back to your original form, the sanitized version that you saved earlier, and look through the document that you created for new language that you typed that you might want to use in future documents. Copy that and paste it into your form as a new option. This is option 1, paragraph, and then I have an option 2 paragraph. You're making your form smarter every time you create a new document from it. Come in here, be sure to eliminate once again any client-specific information, and then save that out as your new form in your form bank, and it'll make all of your future jobs easier. Compare the time and the way it's divided up here. In your current procedure, you're spending a lot of time, a lot of very stressful time, checking for errors at the end. Instead, I want you to take a chunk of that time, not all of it, but a chunk of it, and spend it up front to remove all of the client-specific information and create a perfectly sanitized document for your form bank. Then proceed with your usual process and spend a little less time checking for errors at the end. If you have time, once the document is finished, you update your form with even more intelligence. And then the payoff of all of that is the next time you have to create a purchase and sale agreement, all you have to do is open the form from the form bank, make your substantive revisions, and spend very, very little time at the end checking for errors. Remember, you're not introducing errors into the document as you draft the new material. You're not likely to type he instead of she when you're drafting new material. The errors are all coming from the previous document. So if you remove those errors up front, then you don't have to check for them at the end. And once you've done this, imagine what you'll do when the law changes and you need to change the language in your purchase and sale agreement, or maybe just something occurs to you that you can do better and you want to change the language. Maybe you discover a typo in your finished document. All you have to do is go back to your form, make any corrections that are needed, save the form back into the form bank, and you know that every single purchase and sale agreement that you create in the future is going to use the correct language. It's going to have that pesky typo removed, and you'll live happily ever after. So that's the adjustment I propose that you make to your work process in order to build a form bank as you go. Now we're moving on to phase 2 of our talk here. And we have a handout here. We'll have a link to this handout available at the end of the presentation that you can download for yourself. And I'm going to go through this with you now, and we'll cover the information in it. First off, when you set up a form bank, I need to tell you the difference between template documents and templates in Word. When you're in Word, I'll just type a couple of words here. If I click File, Save As, I have a choice here in the Save As type box of saving this as a Word document, which is what you usually do, or saving it as a Word template. And templates are forms. It's important to save your forms as templates, and I'll show you why. If you go to your form bank, I'm going to open up this folder right here where I have some forms. And I've got some will forms here. Here's a simple will saved as a document, DOCX extension. And here's the same will form saved as a template, a DOTX extension. When you use the one that's saved as a document, I'll just double click this to open it up. It opens the form itself. If you look up at the title bar here, you can see I have opened my will simple form. If I were to make some changes in here and then click the Save button, it's going to overwrite my form with the changes that I've made. People commonly destroy their form banks by saving client-specific information back into the form bank. You don't want to do that. So instead, you save your forms as templates. And that means, here's one saved as a template. When I double-click this to open it up, it creates a new document based on that template. Notice up here in the title bar it says Document 3. This document has not even been saved yet. When I hit File, Save to save this newly created document, it won't allow me to save it back over the top of the form I started with. Instead, I'm being prompted to save it as an entirely new document. So there's no danger of overwriting my forms with client-specific information. That's very important. For form authors, you need to know one additional step here. Form authors will sometimes need to actually open up this form and make revisions to it. To do that, rather than double-click on it to open it, right-click and choose Open. That opens the form itself. As the form author, I can now make changes that I do want to save to the form bank and then save it again. That's the difference between documents and templates. Now let's look at how you can use your forms that you create in Word. And there's two basic methods. First, I'll show you the method that's built into Word, and then I'll show you something a little bit better. In Word, if you save your forms somewhere in a folder, here I've got mine saved on the C drive in a folder named Forms, and you subdivide that into various categories. I've got several categories here. And then you tell Word where these forms are located, and I tell you how to do that here in the handout. We won't go through it, but I've got steps there to do it. Once Word knows where those forms are stored, then anytime I want to use a form, I can click File, New, My Templates, and Word opens this interface. Notice these tabs along the top. Those are the same categories that I used to organize my forms. And then I find a form that I want. Maybe I want this fee schedule form here. Click OK, and it uses that form to create a new document. That's Word's built-in way to organize and use forms. Now I'll show you something a little better. Instead, what I do is use Windows Explorer to access my form bank. To do this, I'd recommend that you create a quick way to get at your forms. There's a few things you could do. You could create a shortcut on your desktop here to your forms, double-click that to open it up. Or you could add that location to your favorites area so it shows up here in your File Explorer. That's done by right-clicking on Favorites and choosing Add Current Location to Favorites. Or my favorite one is to create a dedicated button on your taskbar. Here I've given it this star icon down at the bottom of the screen, so that with one click I can open my form bank at any time. If you're using Windows Vista or later, then creating this icon requires a couple of extra steps. It used to be very easy to create this icon, but Microsoft made it a little harder. So here in the handout, I have the steps you can use to create an icon like this on your desktop that points to any folder anywhere with just a single click. It's very handy. Now let's move into a few tips for form authors. The first one is my favorite. This is default file names. Let's suppose I've got a form for, let me find it. Here it is. I've got a request for referral form. When I use this form, I might make some changes, and then I'm ready to save this document that I created from the form. I click File, Save, and it wants me to name the document that I'm about to save. Notice that it's given me a default file name of TICK. Word is taking its best shot at what it thinks I ought to name this document. The reason it came up with TICK as a suggestion is because I've got the words tick, tack, and toe up here at the top of the document. But that's really a lousy name for this document, so I would instead type request for referral or something like that before I save the document. The problem is that is relying on me to be consistent in my naming system. Misspellings might occur that'll make it hard for me to find this document later, and it's just a hassle for me to type that. So instead, as the form author, I'll close this, I can go into the form itself. I'll close this too. And I'm going to open this request for referral form as the form author, and I'm going to give it a default file name by clicking File, and over here on the right is a title box, and I'll type request for referral here. And I'll save the changes that I just made to this form. File, Save. Now, in the future, use it. and then I click File Save, it gives me a really nice, robust default file name here. I don't have to type a thing. I know that my finished documents are going to have good, consistent file names, so that's easy for me to search for and find them later. That's default file names. The next tip I've got here is shortcuts. In a form bank, it's very important that you never have the same form occur in more than one location. For example, I've got new clients. When I have a new client, I like to send out several documents to them. I send out a new client letter, type A if it's a business client, type B if it's a personal client. I send out a questionnaire, one of two types. I send a fee schedule, a notice to preserve documents if it's a litigation client, and a background of the firm. That's half a dozen different documents, and they're all scattered at various locations in my form bank. It would be nice to have them all in one place. So what I can do with shortcuts is I can create a packets area, and I've got a new business client packet that includes these 4 documents, and a new litigation client packet that includes these 5 documents. I'll show them to you over here in my file structure. Here's my packets. I've got packets for new clients, and for a business client, I have these 4 documents. Notice that this background of the firm document exists in 2 places. I've got it here in my business clients folder and also here in my litigation clients folder. But that's fine because this is not really a form in and of itself. This is a shortcut. A shortcut is just a link or a pointer that directs me to the actual form that's stored elsewhere. So when I double-click this shortcut, it creates a new document based on the form which that shortcut points to. This is a little confusing if you haven't dealt with shortcuts before, but I go over it in some detail here in the handout and show you how to create your own shortcuts so that you can have really sophisticated organization schemes in your form bank which do not require you to have multiple copies of forms in your form bank. Always avoid multiple copies because that just means when you want to change something, you have to go through a whole bunch of different forms to make the one change. With no duplication of forms, you'll only have to make changes in one place. Next here, I have a bonus section, which we're not going to cover during the presentation, but if you download the handout, I just have some handy tips here that you might find useful for making your way through Word. Pay special attention to the last 2 here. The Format Painter and AutoText are 2 of my favorite underused Word tools for anyone who has to do some drafting in Word. And finally, as the last part of our presentation today here, before the questions and answers, I am going to show you the Form tool. The Form tool will help you make your forms smarter, faster, and easier. I've got an example here. The way you create a form using the Form tool is you start with any document. This might be a form you've used in the past, or you could start with a document you used for a previous client. And you do 2 steps as the form author. Step 1 is to add a Q&A table or a questionnaire to the document. And step 2 is to add fields to the document. I'm just going to use these 2 buttons right here. Step 1, I click Table to add the questionnaire to this form. In this particular form, I need to ask for the buyer's name, the seller's name, purchase price, and so forth, date of sale. I'll just do a couple of them here as an example. I ask for the buyer, name of buyer, and I ask for the seller, name of seller, and I would ask a few more questions there too. Step 2, as the form author, is to use fields to encode this document. Right here I would like the name of the seller to appear, so I click Field, choose Seller, Insert Field, And now I have a seller field there. I would do the same for the buyer and for these other fields. When I'm finished, I'll have something that looks like this, where I've replaced all those blanks with various fields. And then as the form user, what I do is come down to the questionnaire here, type in the name of the buyer, the name, or name of the seller rather, the name of the buyer, Jane Smith, purchase price, I'll say 100,000, date of signing, January 1st next year. And then step 2 for the form user is to click this fill button, and all of that information is transferred up into the body of the document. Notice that a couple other things have happened here. As the form author, I decided the format that I wanted the date to appear in here, which is different than the format I used for the date down here. Notice that the name John Doe is appearing in upper lowercase there, but in all uppercase down here. And this is the best one. Notice that the purchase price has been expanded out into words here and uses numerals with 2 decimal places here. So as the form author, I have a lot of control over how this information gets used in the document. That is all done with the free version of the form tool. You can download that today and start working immediately to accomplish that. The last thing I'm going to cover here in my last couple of minutes is just to show you, I've got like 6 examples of how the pro version of the form tool is going to help you be even more sophisticated in your forms. This one, for example, has a lot of fields that depend upon a pronoun, he, she, verb form is a form user. The form user chooses a pronoun to associate with this person, and then when they click the fill button, all of that language is personalized particularly for that person. So as the form user, I don't have to go back and proof all of this. Proofing my form is just a matter of going to the questionnaire at the end and making sure this information is correct. If I discover an error here, perhaps Jane spells her name with a Y, I can make the change in one place, click the fill button a second time, and the form is corrected throughout with the revised information. The second extra feature in the Pro version is lists. Here I've got a form which calls for a list of shareholders to appear in narrative format here, and again in signature format down here. When I fill in the form, here I've typed in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 shareholders and click the fill button. It parcels those names out correctly, inserting the word "and" where needed, and then it also creates my signature blocks here. That's lists. The third item is math. Here I've got a form that asks me for a loan amount, for an interest rate, and for a number of years. And when I click the fill button, the form tool calculates for me the number of monthly payments and the monthly payment for each. I don't have to rely on Excel. I don't have to be copying and pasting from Excel to Word. I don't have to worry about updating links to Excel from within my Word document. All of my calculations are performed right there in my form. The fourth item is master lists. I can create as many master lists as I like. I've got one right now called attorney, and it's just a list of attorneys in my office along with their WSBA numbers and email addresses. That information is available to all of my forms. Here I have a form which asks who's signing this pleading. I'll say that Barry and Gretel are going to sign this pleading. And when I click the fill button, it not only fills in Barry and Gretel's names, but also their WSBA numbers and email addresses, which it has pulled from the master list. When a new attorney joins the firm, I just have to add them to my master list, and that new information will be available to all of the forms that use that master list. I don't have to go around and change all of my various forms. The fifth item is conditions, and conditions allow me to make forms completely automated. The entire content of the form can change depending on answers that are provided by the form user. Here, if I click the fill button with the signer, spouse, and children filled in, I get a form like this. My name is Jerry, my wife is Nanette, I have 2 children, Susan and Jonathan. But if there are no children, I will remove those 2. Then click Fill. I have completely different language now. My name is Jerry, my wife is Nanette, I have no children. And if there's no spouse, I'll delete Nanette here and fill it again. Again, I have completely different language. My name is Jerry, I am not married, I have no children. And you can use this to make entire paragraphs or whole pages of documents come in or go out of the finished document depending on responses to your questionnaire at the bottom. You can add unlimited intelligence to the form. And finally, my very favorite is saving and loading answers. Here I have a motion for summary judgment, which I fill in with all these answers, and I click the fill button to fill it in, and I have my finished document. But then I realize that tomorrow I'm likely to have to do another document in this same case. So I'm going to save this information for later use. I'll click the Save Load button here. I'm going to create an answer file for the Smith v. Jones case. And I'm going to click this blue arrow saying I want to shove all these answers in my current document into my answer file for preservation. I'll click Go to do that. That means tomorrow when I need to create another document, let's say a motion to compel production of documents, in this same case, I don't have to type in all this information again. Instead, I can click that Save Load button, choose the answer file that I created yesterday. This time click the left blue arrow, which means I want to take these answers from the answer file and push them over here into my form. And I've saved myself a lot of typing and potential typos. Notice that this one question still remains to be answered. That's because that question did not appear in yesterday's document. As I use successive, let's put in a 12 there. As I use successive forms in a case, I'll be filling in more and more answers so that my answer file will grow. I'll click the Fill button here, and I've created a finished document with only a few keystrokes.